It's a counter-revolution in high gear and one unlike anything we've seen in any of our lifetimes. America's history, in fact, is made up of a series of revolutions every few generations or so. Of course, there was the original revolution back in 1776. 90 or so years later, there was the revolution of the Civil War. That was followed by the revolution of FDR and the New Deal in the 1930s, which set the stage for ever-increasing gigantic government control of everything. And now, 90 years after that, we have the revolt against FDR's New Deal revolution with Donald Trump's MAGA revolution. The New Deal made Americans more and more dependent on Washington, D.C., minimizing the importance and the centrality of the states as D.C. amassed more and more and more power and wealth, just kind of kept sucking in like to a drain. Less emphasis was placed on the states and more emphasis was placed on America, a national view which forced states to conform to one view, one regimented, constrained view of how to function. Seems okay until you realize it's completely counter to what the Constitution established. You know, the founders were very aware of a centralized government gaining enough power and control to subjugate all the citizens, regardless of what state they lived in. It deliberately limited, constrained the powers of the federal government and assigned all powers, except for a few, to the individual states. The New Deal began to erase all of that until now, 90 years later, we have the type of federal government the founders warned us against and tried to prevent from coming into existence. That is what Trump's counter-revolution is all about, reversing that and returning power to the states for more localized government control, more responsive, really, to individual citizens and their needs and their wants. In Catholicism, this idea of more local rule and problem solving, that's existed from the beginning days of the church. It's called subsidiarity, and it posits that problems should be solved by those most impacted by the problem and therefore normally most able to solve it. In subsidiarity, there is no need to make a federal case out of everything, anything, if it can be solved more regionally or locally. Of course, sometimes you can't solve something locally or regionally. It has to be national, but those times are supposed to be rare and far apart and few in between. Subsidiarity goes back to the idea of individual dignity being the main grounding for everything, that each individual man is made in the image and likeness of God, and that is the foundation for everything government does, including what it does not do. This Catholic principle of self-rule is what Trump is employing in his governing philosophy, and that's exactly why the left is going crazy over it, even resorting to murder and violence. It has been the communist left that has been able to advance its agenda since the introduction of the New Deal, which had expansive socialism at its core. The left gradually seized control of all of the institutions and used that power as a weapon against normal, everyday citizens, the little man, the middle class, taking their money and their freedom and consolidating in the hands of a powerful few. That is what Trump is now upending, and that is what they're going nuts over, and they're going nuts precisely because he's winning on all fronts, streamlining the federal government here at home, demolishing the deep state, and bringing an end to America's involvement in foreign wars and entanglements. Those things are the very levers of power the left has used to consolidate their power and their wealth over the lives of everyday, normal, regular, middle-class Americans. For example, taxes. Trump is replacing federal income taxes with taxes on foreign nations, also known as tariffs, which is the only means in the U.S. Constitution for funding the federal government, meant to deliberately keep it in check. Don't give it a lot of money because it'll run wild and start taking all your freedoms away. Once the federal income tax began, it of course accelerated, and it now cripples millions of American families. The war is over centralized, massive control by a very powerful few versus you having much more control, which we also call freedom. God created us free, and that should never be supplanted by a few power-hungry, greedy control freaks. That is the heart of this counter-revolution. Coming to you from Houston, Texas, I'm Gary Michael Voris. God love you.